For 80 years, this weapon had a flaw that could kill the man operating it, and for 80 years, every military in the world kept using it anyway, because nothing they built was good enough to take its place. Nearly 2 million of them were built during World War II alone. They went on everything: jeeps, bombers, tanks, ships. One aircraft carried 18. The Germans desperately wanted one for themselves and couldn't afford to develop it. In Vietnam, one Marine put a scope on one and used it as a sniper rifle and set a confirmed kill record at 2,500 yards that stood for 35 years. The M2 Browning 50 cal has been in continuous service for nearly 100 years. Close to 100 countries still use it. It is in production right now, today, and in all that time, with all the money and technology thrown at replacing it, nothing has. But here's what most accounts don't tell you. Every single one of those numbers is a person who lived it, or didn't. The 19-year-old changing a barrel in the dark under fire, hoping he got the clicks right. The gunner standing through a Humvee roof hatch with no shield, the most exposed man in the convoy. The Marine in Vietnam who looked at a heavy machine gun and decided it was something else entirely. This is the M2 Browning, and the story of the people who made it legendary. John Moses Browning was already the most prolific firearms designer in American history when the Army came to him in 1917 with a challenge. Armoured plating was appearing on aircraft and vehicles. The machine guns of the time all fired standard infantry rifle cartridges, and those rounds bounced off. The Army needed something bigger. Something that could punch through steel at range, knock aircraft from the sky, and still do everything else a machine gun was asked to do. The specification called for a caliber of at least half an inch and a muzzle velocity exceeding 2,700 feet per second, a significant leap beyond anything in service, and they gave it to the one man they believed could deliver it. Browning started with what he knew, his M1917, a water-cooled 30 caliber machine gun already famous for its reliability, and scaled the whole design up. For the cartridge, he looked at a captured German 13.2mm anti-tank rifle round, recognised it met almost exactly what was needed, and improved it. The result was the 50 BMG 12.7 by 99mm, a round that delivered between 10,000 and 15,000 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle, roughly 4 times what a 30-06 produced, 5 to 10 times the energy of the 8mm Mauser round the German MG42 would later fire. Full trials began exactly 1 week after World War I ended, and it performed badly. The water-cooled version weighed 120 pounds when filled. The air-cooled variant was 84 pounds, plus a 44-pound tripod, plus ammunition. Infantry couldn't carry it. The barrel overheated fast. The recoil was too heavy for accurate fire. Aircraft couldn't take the weight. Early armoured vehicles couldn't fit it because ammunition only fed from the left side. The only practical use was fixed coastal anti-aircraft defence. The whole programme started to look like an expensive dead end. And then in 1926, John Browning died in his workshop in Liger, Belgium. The weapon still unfinished. The problem still unsolved. His team kept working. 2 fixes changed everything. A single receiver design, reconfigurable into 7 variants simply by swapping components, and able to feed from either side so the same gun could mount on anything. And a heavy barrel that finally solved the overheating problem. The M2HB heavy barrel. The weapon that would define the next 100 years of warfare. It had taken nearly 2 decades, but when it finally worked, it worked completely, decisively, and with consequences nobody had fully imagined. The world was about to find out what that meant. Here's what the 50 BMG does that no rifle caliber round could come close to. At 100 yards, it penetrates approximately 1 inch of hardened steel armour. The round leaves the barrel at around 2,900 feet per second, nearly 50% above the threshold at which high-energy tissue destruction becomes unavoidable. Half an inch wide, it creates a wound channel that transfers energy into surrounding tissue through hydraulic shock, damaging organs that weren't even directly in its path. A hit anywhere near a limb's major bones or blood vessels wasn't survivable without immediate surgery. Usually it meant losing the limb. A hit to the torso or head, game over. And the M2 fired this round at up to 600 rounds per minute, with an effective range exceeding 2,000 yards. That's the critical number. because it meant the M2 outranged almost every enemy machine gun it would ever face. German gunners could be engaged before they could return fire. Any cover that wasn't reinforced concrete became temporary. 200 rounds concentrated on a single point and a sandbag bunker was gone. A brick wall was gone. A vehicle door was gone. At Pearl Harbor, the M2 was already on the ships, the last ring of anti-aircraft defense, and it worked that day under the worst possible conditions. After Pearl Harbor, full mass production, just under 2 million built by the end of the war. It went on everything: jeeps, half-tracks, tank destroyers, landing craft, Sherman tanks, mounted on the back of the turret, operated by a commander standing on the engine deck, completely exposed to enemy fire because there was simply no other way to point it at the sky. American tankers developed recon by fire, a short burst into any suspicious bush or building, either provoking a response or ending whoever was hiding there without wasting a main gun shell. The German army had nothing equivalent. Their MG-34 and MG-42 were brilliant weapons, and the Lafette tripod that converted them to a heavy configuration was genuinely ingenious, with a mechanical computer for range setting and fire zones that the Allies never matched. But the cartridge was the problem. The 8mm Mauser round was the same one from World War I. Against the 50 BMG, it was outranged and outpowered at close range and at distance. The Germans wanted one for themselves. They even had plans to produce 50 BMG ammunition for captured guns on their U-boats. They couldn't make it happen. And here's what that meant in practice for the men on the receiving end. A German infantry officer wrote in his field journal that there was one American weapon his unit has no answer for. Not the Sherman, not the artillery. The heavy machine gun on everything. He wrote, "When it opens fire, you do not look for cover. You are already dead or you're already running." That was the M2 Browning. And the worst was still to come. The aircraft version of the M2 was a different animal entirely. On the ground, the M2HB fired around 500 rounds per minute. The AN-M2, built for aircraft, pushed that to 850, sometimes beyond 1200. The reason was physics. An enemy fighter crossing your sights while you're travelling at 300 miles an hour gives you 2 seconds of firing opportunity, if you're lucky. You need as many rounds in the air as possible in that window. So they pushed the rate of fire up, and then they multiplied the guns. The P-51 Mustang carried 6, the P-47 Thunderbolt carried 8, the Hellcat, the Corsair, the F-4U, most American fighters of the war were at their core delivery platforms for concentrated 50 caliber fire. The B-17 Flying Fortress, which if you've watched this channel you already know cost a devastating human price, carried up to 13 M2s across its turrets and positions. The entire defensive architecture of the most important bomber of the war was built around this weapon. And then there was the Douglas A-26 Invader, 8 50 cals in the nose, 4 in each wing, 2 in a dorsal turret, 18 M2 Brownings on a single aircraft. When strafing ground targets, locomotives, armoured vehicles, fuel depots, concentrated fire from 6, 8 or 18 guns at once worked against almost anything. Lighter Japanese tanks were cut apart in banzai charges. Early Panzer IVs could be penetrated from the side. Anything thinly armoured was simply not safe. Then there was the M45 quad mount. 4 M2s on an electrically powered turret, traverse 360 degrees, elevate to straight up, designed for anti-aircraft work. But once the Luftwaffe was largely driven from European skies, American crews turned it on ground targets. German infantry gave it names: Meat Chopper, Kraut Mower. Those names didn't come from nowhere. Imagine getting hit by one M2, now multiply it by 4, firing simultaneously with a trained gunner tracking you. The crews who faced it didn't get a second chance to describe what it was like. But here's something that doesn't get said enough. Every one of those 18 guns on that A-26 needed a man to maintain it, load it, fix it when it jammed. Every quad mount had a gunner standing behind it. The M2 didn't win the war, the people operating it did. And some of those positions were among the most dangerous on any battlefield, as one man in Vietnam was about to prove, in a way no one had anticipated. Vietnam, 1967. Staff Sergeant Carlos Hathcock was already becoming one of the most feared snipers of the war. 93 confirmed kills. A $30,000 bounty on his head placed by the North Vietnamese Command. roughly $270,000 in today's money. A white feather he wore in his hat as a deliberate personal provocation to any enemy sniper who wanted to try collecting it. And he looked at an M2 Browning on a tripod and decided it was a sniper rifle. Think about what that means. The M2 is a cruise-served heavy machine gun. It weighs 84 pounds. It fires up to 600 rounds per minute. It was designed for volume, for suppression, for destroying cover and vehicles and aircraft. Precision single-shot fire at extreme range was not in the specification. Hathcock didn't care about the specification. He mounted a telescopic sight to the bracket, worked out how to fire single-controlled shots from a weapon built for bursts, calculated the ballistics of a round not designed for precision work at extreme distance, and used it to achieve a confirmed kill at 2,500 yards, 1 mile and a quarter, against a target that had no idea the shot was coming from that far away. The longest confirmed sniper kill in history at that point, a record that stood for 35 years, until a Canadian sniper in Afghanistan broke it in 2002, using a purpose-built 50 caliber anti-material rifle. A rifle that existed because of what Hathcock did, because that shot directly inspired Ronnie Barrett years later to build a dedicated long-range rifle around the 50 BMG cartridge. The Barrett M82, now standard equipment in dozens of militaries, capable of destroying light vehicles, disabling aircraft on runways, defeating body armour at ranges nothing else could touch. Hathcock improvised with what was available and permanently changed what the 50 caliber round was understood to be capable of. The ripple from that single shot in 1967 is still moving through military decisions being made right now. But while Hathcock was demonstrating what the M2 could do beyond its design, the weapon was quietly carrying a problem that had followed it since Browning's team first finished it. A problem that had already killed people, and would keep killing them for decades more. Here is what rarely makes it into the histories of the most successful heavy machine gun ever built. For 80 years, it had a flaw that could turn it into a grenade in the hands of the man firing it. When Browning designed the original M2, manufacturing tolerances of the era couldn't hold the precision needed for two critical dimensions. Headspace, the distance between the bolt face and the base of the cartridge case when fully seated in the chamber, and timing, the exact moment the firing pin drops relative to the position of the recoiling parts. Both had to be exactly right. Too tight and the round wouldn't chamber or fire. Too loose and the cartridge case ruptured inside the chamber. Internal explosion, shrapnel, destroyed gun, and potentially a dead gunner. Browning's solution was to make both dimensions adjustable by the operator. Every time a barrel was changed, the gunner used a specialized gauge, screwed the barrel in or out by specific click increments, and manually reset both dimensions. Under controlled conditions with a trained gunner, time, and good light, it worked. Picture the alternative. The barrel is too hot to touch without a mitten. Incoming rounds, darkness or smoke. A 19-year-old who has done this 100 times in training, but never quite like this. The common shortcut was to assume the click count that had worked on the last barrel change would work on this one. Mount it without checking, get back behind the gun. Sometimes that was fine. Sometimes it ended with a ruptured case, shrapnel, and a medevac. This wasn't a rare edge case. This was a known, documented hazard of operating the M2. In World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. Across 8 decades and dozens of conflicts, the weapon that armies refused to give up was quietly injuring and killing the people using it through a flaw baked into its original design. The M2A1 arrived in 2010. Headspace and timing are now factory set permanently into each barrel. To change a barrel, retract the charging handle, rotate the barrel by its carrying handle, slide it out. New barrel in, locks into the J slot, ready. No gauge, no clicks, no calculation in the dark. It took until 2010, 80 years, and through all of it, every conflict, every theatre, every generation of soldiers who learned to work around the problem. Armies kept choosing the M2 over every alternative because the alternative was something worse. That tells you everything about this weapon. Serial number 324. The 324th M2 ever built, served for 94 years before it was retired in 2015. 94 years. The men who first fired it were long dead. The wars they fought in were history. serial number 324 was still going. Here's the centre of the M2 Browning's story, and it isn't the weapon. For 100 years, every military that used it also tried to replace it. They ran trials, wrote specifications, built prototypes, spent billions. The weight alone, 84 pounds before mount or ammunition, made commanders in conflict after conflict demand something lighter, something a smaller crew could carry. And they kept coming back to the same answer. Nothing hit as hard. Nothing reached as far. Nothing worked reliably in as many configurations, in as many environments, through as much punishment, over as long a sustained period. The candidates failed. The M2 didn't. Veterans who fired it in Korea described it the way soldiers describe something that saved their life so many times they stopped counting the individual moments. Veterans from Vietnam, the Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan, the same. The weapon that was always there, the one you trusted. One veteran wrote, 50 cal, most fun you can have with your pants on. Another, who commanded M60 tanks in the late 70s, described adjusting fire at 1600 meters with a single tap on the back of the receiver, a feather touch on a weapon that weighed as much as a man, and landing right on target. Precision hiding inside all that power. For much of its service life in modern conflicts, the gunner operated it standing through a roof hatch, the most exposed position in any vehicle, any convoy, any patrol. No shield for most of that time. Just the gun and the person behind it, and whatever was coming back. Their fix finally came as remote weapons stations, a joystick and a screen from inside the vehicle, the gunner protected by armour. The gun still goes outside, still does what Browning's team finally made it do nearly a century ago. Around 100 countries use the M2 today. It is in production right now. New ones are being built, being shipped, being mounted on vehicles in conflicts happening as you watch this. John Browning died in his workshop in 1926, the weapon he designed still unfinished, the problem still unsolved. His team carried it over the line, and the weapon they finished has outlasted the wars it served in, the governments that procured it, and every attempt to build something better. As one veteran put it, the last 50 cal gunner has yet to be born. If you had a relative who operated the M2 Browning in combat, served alongside one, or if you fired one yourself, please share the story in the comments. If this is the kind of content you want, hit subscribe. New videos every week. Catch you on the next one.